All right, I have another friend. This is Libby Cotter. Yes, Libby Cotter. Libby Williams.
That's a throwback.
Libby Williams. I know your last name.
Yeah, you do.
So Libby has been here longer than me. You started maybe just a year or 6 months or so before I came. So has been involved in lots of things over the years. Was part of our missions team for a long time. 7 years ago, came on our staff to work in our CP Kids ministry, and just has brought so much goodness to that ministry. If you have kids downstairs, you see her all the time, and she's been such a light and joy on our staff team over the last several years as well. Today is her last day on our staff team. She is officially retiring in a new season of life. She is really empty nested. Like, kids are now post-college. They're in their big girl and big boy jobs in Columbus, Ohio, and in Columbia, South Carolina. So for whatever reason, she wants to have time to go and see them. So the job gets in the way sometimes. So that's in the new season for her, and we're grateful for that piece, but also sad you're going to be leaving us here. But she's not going anywhere. She's going to continue to be here and be a part of the ministry here and just not get paid for it, which is also great. So thank you for that. So we just want to honor and appreciate Libby today. If you have kids down there, you're going to get the chance to see her down there as well when you pick them up. So we'd love for you to stop by and just give her some encouragement as she parts ways from our staff team. But let's just honor her right now. So we love you. Thank you so much. Love you. Yeah, love you. All right, how many of you are roller coaster people? You like to ride roller coasters? So a lot of you. That's awesome. I used to as well. I grew up a few hours south of here in Mount Sterling, Kentucky, and probably around 5th grade, we started making an annual trek to go to Kings Island. And it was a big deal because that was a long drive, especially back then. It was 55 miles an hour the whole way. I'm that old. So there was so much anticipation. You know, I remember my first time riding the Beast. We stood in line for over an hour. And it was so jarring that I remember just punching myself in the face, you know, and I got off and I thought, that was amazing. And I remember when the Vortex opened, was there in line for that, and there was a loop, and so I was a nope. I didn't think, there's no reason to be upside down on a roller coaster for any reason at all. But after a few years of physical growth and emotional growth, maybe I decided it was time, and it was amazing. I remember waiting close to 2 hours in line for Top Gun when it opened. 2 hours. You could watch Top Gun on your phone today in a line like that. Our kids are so spoiled. Like, we had to talk to each other the whole time. It's attached, it's attached to the top of the track, so it's a different kind of coaster. It's called the Bat now or something. So when you come off that giant hill, there's nothing underneath you, so it's like you were flying, and it was amazing. I have so many childhood memories of Kings Island. I loved roller coasters, but 5 or 6 years ago, something started to change. Like, my body began to question my brain's life choices when I would get off of one. And after 3 or 4 rides, I just couldn't do it. I just felt off the whole time. I felt sick, but I wanted to keep riding. I wanted to push through. I wanted to think the next time will be different, and the next time was never different. It was usually worse. Like the last time I rode the Beast, I felt like death for the rest of the day. I rode Mystic Timbers when it came out because it sounded super cool. It wasn't. I came off looking for a place to throw up, and I just can't do it anymore. I can't do the ups and downs. I can't do the twists and turns. I've just kind of aged out. You know what I haven't aged out of? It's the blue ice cream. The blue ice cream is worth a season pass, I'm telling you. Just to be able to go and get that blue ice cream. That stuff is so good. But that's the only reason I would go now. I would love to have one last ride. I would love to have one last hurrah, but I just know better. Like, knowing how I'm going to feel afterwards is what keeps me from making a decision I'm gonna regret. And if I could only apply this same logic and discipline to the roller coaster of sin, if only I could feel the same way about the beast of sin that I feel about the beast of Kings Island, if only I could play it forward and know how badly it's going to beat me up and toss me around, and how sick I'm going to feel afterwards. Maybe I would learn my lesson. Maybe I would finally age out, but I just keep climbing back on, thinking maybe this time it'll be different. You know, most of the ups and downs and twists and turns in our lives are the result of our own bad decisions and our own disobedience to God's design and desires for us. Not all of them, but the majority of them. And it's generally this particular ride that we get on over and over and over again. For many of us, there's a particular sin or set of sins that we just keep going back to. There's this pattern that we just keep following. Theologians call these besetting sins. And for some of you, maybe your besetting sin is pride. It just keeps you from being vulnerable and authentic. It keeps you from exposing a weakness or admitting a failure. You don't know how to ask for help. You don't want anybody to know that you don't have it all together or you don't have it all figured out. For some of you, maybe it's anger. You've been hurt by somebody close to you, and a parent or a relative or a close friend, and it's been festering in you for a long time, and you'll just kind of have these moments of just intense anger that just comes out of you. And maybe it's towards your spouse or towards your kids, and it doesn't have anything to do with them, but it's just in there. And you don't want to be angry, but that's just where you go. For some of you, maybe it's lust. You had some kind of explicit experience in your past that distorted your view of sex, and so your eyes wander and your mind wanders constantly, and when nobody's looking, you take a peek because it's just that easy. And you try to justify it, like, well, if she would take more initiative or if he would be more attentive. But it never ends well. You jump on time and time again, but it just lets you off at the same old place, at the ramp of guilt and shame. Maybe it's dishonesty, maybe it's materialism, maybe it's gossip, but most of us have a particular sin pattern that's kind of always been there in the background, and at just the right or the wrong circumstance, it shows up. And we know that we shouldn't get on, because we know how it's going to end. We know how it's going to make us feel. We've been on this ride 1,000 times, but here we are, just climbing back on again. And you think, how can this still be an issue for me? How can I not get past this one thing in my life? Why does this keep coming around? Why do I keep climbing on? Well, if you've got a bad habit, you are in good company. Because as it turns out, our friend Abraham was 100% human, just like we are. And that is the core of our problem. We are human beings in a failed and broken world. And so temptation is always in front of us. So let's just get on the roller coaster ride of Abraham's life for a quick recap. You remember our discipleship square, the journey of the disciple, kind of 4 stages. The D stands for discipleship. So the first stage is when we come about this new orientation in life. We begin to live within the ways of Jesus. We're learning a new operating system, and it's exciting. And we have this kind of high enthusiasm, but we have this low competency. We don't really know what we don't know. And then we make the corner into D2, where it's a little bit disorienting because things aren't going the way we thought they would go. And so our enthusiasm is now low and our competency is low. Or like, well, is this a bait and switch? I thought this was going to make my life easier. But we've said it around here a million times. that following Jesus never makes our life easier. Life is hard no matter who you follow. But we stay in it because we know it makes our lives better. And so when we stay in it and we dig in and we don't give up and we give ourselves over to the disciplines and we read Scripture and we spend time with the Lord, we have this vision and grace of what life can be in Jesus, and we make this turn into D3 where we're reoriented back into the way of Jesus, and we have this growing enthusiasm and this growing competence, and eventually we make it into D4 where this is just who we are, where we can say like Paul, I've learned the secret of being content. I don't need all this other stuff. Jesus is what fills me up. Where we can say, like Paul, to live is Christ, to die is gain. Man, life is good, but when I go to heaven, that's even better. It takes a lot of maturity to say those kinds of things. And so that's been the journey of Abraham. God called him back in chapter 12 to leave his homeland, and he didn't give him any details, didn't give him any directions. And Abraham just goes because somehow he has seen the grace of this God. He has seen the trustworthiness of this God. And so he follows this God wherever he would lead him. So this was this up moment in his life. He's in D1. He's got a new orientation. He is excited. He doesn't know what he doesn't know. But he gets in Egypt and there's a famine in the land. And suddenly he finds himself in D2, disoriented, going, wait a minute, I didn't think it would be like this. And so he takes matters into his own hand. He lives by sight, not by faith. He moves down to Egypt. He pawns his wife Sarah off as his sister to the Pharaoh. And so this is a down moment where he jeopardizes the entire plan of redemption. But then in Genesis 3, we saw his servants and Lot's servants begin to quarrel over the land, and their animals didn't have enough land to graze on. And Abraham takes the high road and he says to Lot, there's so much land, let's separate. You go your way, I'll go mine. You pick first. He defers. He takes the posture of a humble servant. He puts Lot above himself. This was an up moment in his life, and he moves over here into D3, living in the ways of a Jesus he's never met. And then in chapter 16, Abraham and Sarah, they've been on this journey now for 11 years. God promised them a son, but there's yet to be a son. And Sarah says, I want you to take my maidservant Hagar, and I want you to take her as a second wife, and maybe you will conceive with her. And Abraham says, okay. What could go wrong? Down moment, back in to D2. Then in Genesis 18, God reveals his plan to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and we saw Abraham plead for the cities on behalf of the city to God, that if there would be any righteous, that you would spare them. And so he makes the journey back into D3, where he's standing in the gap for lost people. He's interceding on their behalf. He wants them to be saved. But as Kevin laid out for us last week, there were no righteous people in the city, and so God destroyed the cities for their colossal wickedness. And at the end of Genesis 19, we see Abraham coming back to the place where he pleaded with the Lord, and he's looking out over what used to be Sodom and Gomorrah, and all it is smoke and ash. And we don't know why, but for whatever reason, he jumps back on the roller coaster, and he moves his family, and he goes back down and into D2, and that's where we find our story today in Genesis chapter 20. It says, from there, Abraham traveled to the region of the Negev and settled between Kadesh and Shur. Now, he didn't leave the promised land. He was still within the boundaries of the promised land, but he wandered away from the area where he had been for several years, and now he finds himself in the company of the Philistines, and this is a dangerous place to be. And so look what happens. While he was staying in Gerar, Abraham said about his wife Sarah, she is my sister. So King Abimelech of Gerar had Sarah brought to him. Now, we've been here before. It didn't go well the first time, but maybe this time will be different. Maybe this time it'll work out. Maybe this giant hill is not so bad. See, that's what the enemy wants him to think, because the enemy's objective is to destroy God's plan of redemption. And Genesis chapter 20, verse 2, this is almost the end of the story. The story could have ended right here. This could have been the last verse of the whole Bible. It would have been easy for you to read the Bible in a year. But there would have been no point, because there would be no hope and no redemption. See, there's more than that's going on in this passage than just a lying husband and an arrogant king. See, this is lower story stuff, but there's the upper story behind it, where both of them are pawns in the hands of Satan, who is trying to destroy the work of God. So let's just connect the dots a little bit. If we go back to chapter 18, God reassures Abraham and Sarah that they will have a child. He says, a year from now, you're going to have a child. She's 89, he's 99, and God's saying that you're not quite old enough yet. We need to give this another year. I need you to be at the ripe old age of 90 before a baby comes out of your barren womb, because I want everybody to know that it had nothing to do with you and everything to do with me. And so every down moment on their journey it was either caused by or used by Satan to try and destroy God's plan before it ever got started. Satan was either causing these things or he was leveraging these things to take out God's plan. And this is just what Satan does. He's constantly trying to destroy the work of God in our lives. And so just know this, that the more engaged you are in your faith, the more of a threat you become to the enemy and the more punches he will throw at you. It's just the way it works. Satan will never waste an opportunity to take you out of the game, either through a direct temptation or by using a difficult circumstance in your life to cause you to question the goodness of God. And that's what he's doing here with Abraham, because if he can prevent this son from being born, he can prevent the birth of a nation, which will then prevent the birth of a Savior, which will then prevent our salvation. He's only got a year left to shut this plan down. So in chapter 20, he goes back to Abraham's weak spot. He goes back to his Achilles heel. He goes back to the sin that Abraham has always struggled with, his besetting sin, which is the sin of selfishness. See, the reason that Abraham lied about Sarah being his wife in Genesis 12 was because he was trying to protect himself. He had no regard for what might happen to Sarah in Pharaoh's household. And 24 years later, he does the same thing. He puts his wife on the altar again to save his own skin. Sarah is close to being pregnant. And because she's now part of Abimelech's harem, what will people think about Isaac when he's born? They will think that he's the son of Abimelech, not the son of Abraham. It's really hard to build a nation with what's believed to be someone else's child. So do you see how crafty Satan is? He whispers this lie in his ear that sounds like the truth. If you don't lie about who Sarah is, they will kill you. And what good will you be to God's plan if you're dead? I mean, that even sounds spiritual, right? So Abraham bites just like Eve, just like Adam, just like us. See, Satan's strategy has not changed one bit. He whispers these lies that just sound like the truth, and maybe they even sound spiritual. Like this one. Don't you think that God would want you to be happy? She's standing in the way of your spiritual growth. He's holding you back from all the things that God wants for you. See, there are some of you right now that are thinking about walking away from your marriage because you think that's going to solve all of your problems. But divorce is not the solution. Jesus is the solution. See, the wrong person on this side of I do becomes the right person on this side of I do. Because you entered into a covenant. And if that covenant, if that marriage isn't worth fighting for, what else is in your life? If you're willing to give up on that, what are you willing to fight for? So what does it look like to go to the mat for your marriage? What does it look like to lean on God rather than your own understanding right now? What does it look like to embrace the hard and to trust God's all-sufficient grace to get you through and to give you what you need? Or maybe you're buying this lie. You know what? The best thing you can do for your family is to be a provider. That's an age-old lie that so many people, and in particular men, have believed that their most important job is to provide for their family. So they give themselves over to their career and they climb up in order to give their family everything they could ever want, except themselves. They're too busy to play. Why would you work so hard to provide something they won't even remember? Why would you work so hard to provide something that one day they're just going to lose? See, your family doesn't need your provision, they need your presence. And I'm not telling you to quit your job, I'm just telling you to quit making your job your God. You think it's the answer to everything your family needs. It's not. Jesus is. So work hard, absolutely, but don't sacrifice your family under the guise of providing for your family. Know the difference. You can be replaced at work. You cannot be replaced at home. See, Satan's goal in the Old Testament was to destroy God's plan of salvation, his plan of redemption. He failed. So his plan today is to keep us from living in God's redemption by making us a slave to sin. That's what he's working so hard at today. See, it's possible for you to be saved and still be miserable. To have no joy in your salvation, to still be caught up in the same kind of sin and to still be trapped in that. It is possible, and so many people have that as their story. It was the religious leaders of the day who rejected Jesus because they refused to believe the truth about who he was. See, Satan was working on them and then working through them to keep Jesus from getting to the cross, and he calls it out in John chapter 8. Look what he says. He said, Jesus said to them, "If God were your Father, you would love me, because I came from God and I am here, for I didn't come on my own, but he sent me. You are of your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires." That's a big accusation. Speaking to religious leaders who are trying to do the work and the will of God, he says, you are of your father, the devil, and you want to carry those desires out. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth. See, when you continue to live in the same pattern of sin over and over and over again, you are living out the desires of Satan, not the desires of God. That the enemy has you right where he wants you, and it's not going to end well. It's time to get off this roller coaster of sin because God has better things for you, and they can only be discovered in faithful obedience to God. And maybe you're saying, "Hey, Shawn, that sounds great, but I've tried. And I can't break free. I've tried to break out of anger, but I just can't do it. I'm still filled with envy, regardless of my attempt to find contentment. I'm still filled with lust, and I just can't control it." Here's what you do. You have no idea. Last service, we tried out a new TV, and it was abysmal. And this is my old TV, and you just have no idea. Do the right thing right now. Do the right thing right now. What's the right thing to do right now? Where you are in your situation, whatever sin you're confronted with, what is the right thing to do right now? If you're struggling with anger, maybe the right thing to do right now is to go apologize for your last blow up, because you've never done that. So do that and see what happens. If you're struggling with envy, maybe the right thing to do right now is just to get off social media so you don't see everybody else's perfect life. If you're miserable, you can always jump back on. But do that and just see what happens. If you're struggling with pornography, maybe the right thing to do is to confess it to his trusted friend and put some restrictions on your devices. So do that and just see what happens. See, there's always a right thing to do right now. And breaking a sin habit starts by just doing the right thing right now. And then guess what you do? What you do next? Just the next right thing. It's complicated, I know. You do the right thing right now, and then you do the next right thing. You don't have to do all of the right things right now. Just the one right thing right now. Abraham did the wrong thing because he was thinking about the whole thing. I have to lie right now or I'm going to die. I'm not going to get out of here alive. No, you need to do the right thing and trust God to honor His covenant with you. Do the right thing and trust that God is going to come through for you. Our job is just to do the right thing and trust God with the whole thing. Faith, here's what faith is. It is just a long obedience in the same direction. It's a long obedience in the same direction. It's just a series of right steps taken over and over and over and over again. And on that journey, you're going to take a wrong step? Yep. Then what do? Get back up, take the next right step. Just keep taking the right step right now, and eventually you find yourself in a different place. This is how you get from D2 into D3 into D4. This is how you grow in your faith. You just keep doing the next right thing. So right now, just do the right thing. God will never let you fail at doing what is right. And here's how I know that. Because He did not let Abraham succeed at doing what was wrong. Abraham didn't understand the whole story. He missed it somewhere along the way. He missed it. And this is what happens with selfishness, right? We don't pay attention to anything but ourselves. He wasn't thinking about God's plan. He was only thinking about his protection. He was selfish. He put Sarah in jeopardy. He put every one of us in jeopardy. We all stood to lose from this decision because that's how sin works. It never just impacts you, it impacts everybody around you. It impacts your family, it impacts your coworkers, it impacts everybody in your orbit. So the next time you're tempted to blow up, the next time you're tempted to look at something you shouldn't look at on the internet, the next time that you're tempted to tell a half-truth, which by the way is a whole lie, like just play it out beyond yourself. Who stands to lose here with your bad decision? That will help you do the right thing right now. Had Abraham stayed in D3, that's what he would have done. But instead, he was disoriented and selfish. He finds himself back in D2. And so God steps in to keep this plan together. But He doesn't confront Abraham. He confronts Abimelech. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, "You are about to die because of the woman you have taken, for she is a married woman." And now Abimelech had not approached her, and by approach it means, you know. So he said, "Lord, would you destroy a nation even though it is innocent? Didn't He Himself say to me, 'She is my sister'?" And she herself said, "He is my brother." So Sarah was conspiring in this. "I did this with a clear conscience and clean hands." Then God said to him in a dream, "Yes, I know that you did this with a clear conscience. I have also kept you from sinning against me. Therefore, I have not let you touch her." So God's intervening. "Now return the man's wife, for he is a prophet." What? "And he will pray for you, and you will live. But if you do not return her, know that you will certainly die, and all who are yours." Early in the morning, Abimelech got up, wouldn't you? Called all of his servants together and personally told them all these things, and the men were terrified. So Abimelech got up to go and do the right thing, to do as God had said. And so a pagan king behaved more righteously than a chosen prophet. That's what's going on here. And surely his jaw drops when God calls Abraham a prophet. Like, is this how the people of God behave? Is this what that looks like? Like they lie to protect themselves? They judge and assume the worst about people who don't believe what they believe? Is that how this works? Because that's exactly what Abraham did. Abimelech, in the next verses, he confronts him. See, God didn't confront Abraham. Abimelech confronts him. Abimelech calls him out. And he says, "What did I do to you to cause you to do this to me?" And Abraham says, "I did it because I thought there was no fear of God in these people, and that they would kill me because of my wife." Consider the irony. I lied to you because I didn't think you were good people. 1 + 1, just carry the 4. He assumed the worst about them instead of trusting the best about God. So instead of doing what was right,